Hello, Annie Moyer here from Sun and Moon Yoga. I'm here with Denyse LeFever. Denyse is a an experienced teacher in many different realms of yoga, and we're here today to talk about accessible yoga and cultural literacy around what yoga is and who can do it and what doing yoga looks like. So, welcome, Denyse.
Thank you, Annie. And thank you for engaging in this topic, which is near and dear to my heart.
Absolutely. So I'll do a full disclosure about how this topic came up between you and me. And we were talking about doing a description for your chair yoga dance workshop. And I made a comment to you about like, well, should we indicate that this would be a good workshop for people who are in a wheelchair or elderly people? And you came back with some very wise words that pointed out a big blind spot that I had about the associations that we make around how we are modifying yoga and who we think we're talking to.
Well, I think it's a topic that I've struggled with because my body has changed over 50 years of doing yoga. And so I'm probably a person who would be considered elderly. And I have some chronic conditions, which means that some poses that are normally considered accessible are not accessible to me. So the light bulb went off for me when I did some training down at Duke University and listened to teachers that taught a wide range of students who had different levels of capability. And my conclusion at the end of it is yoga is yoga. We make it asana based here in the West, and we try to get the body in different shapes. But as long as we're connecting the body and mind and spirit together, in my mind, that's yoga, and the specific pose is not as important. As somebody that, when I was much younger, could do all the poses, I remember coming to yoga class in my 50s and weeping because I could not do what I had one time considered to be yoga. So my modifications were really meeting my body where it was and still finding a way to feel good and connect it to my breath and spirit afterwards.
When we talk about accessible yoga, so often the conversation lands on taking a challenging posture and then modifying it so that other people can do it. And I I think of the analogy of if you have some idea that uh, that a brown-haired, white-skinned person is the default human, are you suggesting that a darker skinned person or a blonde person is a modification of a human? Are they not still a human? Is a warrior pose in a chair less than a warrior pose on your feet? Or is it simply a warrior pose that takes on a different form?
Right. Or it's a form about stretching your upper body so that you get a sense of expansiveness and feeling your feet anchored. And so sometimes I will not even use traditional yoga terms. I will really credit Sherry Zach Morris, who's one of my teachers, as expanding my definition of yoga because I really had to get over my own mindsets of what yoga was to be able to offer this practice to people of many different ages and varying body types and abilities.
Talk a little bit, if you would, about people working with chronic conditions and how we can support them in a practice that's fulfilling, that's expressive, that is everything that yoga should be in terms of seeking some connection to a deeper self into a divine presence.
The way I like to approach it, which I think is what most yogis would agree with, is I invite them to experience sensations in their bodies. And if what I'm showing as a facilitator doesn't feel right in their body, they shouldn't do it. I try to offer many options to get to what the intention is behind the pose. But if they still don't get it, I will ask them to think about what feels good in their body and to do that. And again, one of the things I'm finding great about Zoom is people can turn off the video. They don't have to watch other people. They can do what feels good for them. So it's really, I like to say, you're welcoming people to make their own choice rather than instructing them in a proper way of doing something.
And then the definition of proper,
Right,
it takes on new life,
right.
because proper according to whom? To some external dictate, or to the person who's having the experience?
Yes. And again, another person I'll credit for, who's a traditional yoga teacher who helped me see this is Leslie Kaminoff. His teaching
Yeah.
style is one that says, when you ask a question, well, whose body are you talking about? And I
Right.
think that to me was such wisdom and so aligns with a lot of the population that I interact with.
Touch on a little bit about invisible conditions and the assumptions we make about someone who walks into a room or sits down in front of the camera, and we assume because they look a certain way that they have certain abilities.
I think this is where the really, to me, the subtle implications of yoga come into play, and it's more about yoga philosophy. It's challenging our own belief systems because our impressions of people are shaped by cultural representation and we harbor them in our head, whether we intend to or not. So you may see a young 20-year-old walk into a class, very thin build. She looks like she's very athletic, and then you find out that she's up for a lung and heart replacement. And then you just have a totally different impression as to why this individual walked into a general class and why weren't they in the hot yoga class or the vinyasa. So again, I think it's that encouragement of telling people that wherever you are, our bodies are different, our lived experience is different. Just try to find that place where you can feel that sense of comfort and ease. The sthira, what is it? You know the
Stira sukham.
There you go. I mean, to me, that's yoga, right?
Right. So, and it works on the flip side too, because if a larger bodied person comes in the room, we have another set of assumptions.
Right.
And take one look at the glorious gift of the practices of people like Jessamine Stanley and Diane Bondi, in and get ready to check everything you've ever assumed at the door.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really honor people like that are standing up and saying something. When I returned to yoga, I was in my 50s, and I would say I probably spent the first several years terribly shy and huddled, if you will. And that is so not my personality, but I felt I was so different than my cohorts in teacher training. And I always kept asking myself, what am I doing here? I'm older and fatter than most of the people in the room. And so when I started to see people like Diane Bundy and then even some of the older teachers that teach, that was really empowering for me.
You say you returned to yoga. Where'd you go before that?
I became a type A career goal oriented person.
I'm
So
sorry. I'm sorry about that.
yeah, no, I mean, I loved my career. I really can't complain. I mean, I was a young person who was going to ashrams in my 20s, and if I had the opportunity and thought I could support myself, I probably would have joined an ashram. But there was this head that said, "Oh no, 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 you're going to be a homeless woman if you do that." So I got caught up in the corporate success ladder, if you will, and it was very good to me, and I loved it. I got a lot of benefit out of it, but I also got a lot of harm. I overate. I got type 2 diabetes, And I still have trouble relaxing. So that's probably why I teach so many relaxing practices.
What was, can you share something about your ashram experiences?
Yeah, I grew up in the Philadelphia area. So, well, it started out really, my mother sent me to yoga when I was 16 because I had anxiety about college placement tests and I was convinced
Mm,
I wouldn't get in. So, my mother's the wise one here. And I joined a local group, and the teachers were all Kripalu based because Yogi
mm,
Denyse started there. So after I got into it, and really it was the philosophy that drew me in more than the asana, because I was pretty athletic. So the asana was nice, but I really liked the meditative and reflective nature of it, especially at the age of 16. So I joined what was then called a mundal, Mundl, and it was a woman, and I crack up. I reminded my class the other day, I'm probably the age that woman was, and I thought it was so nice that this old lady was sharing her wisdom with us young people. But anyway, I got really into it, and she started talking about the various places you could go. Well, the first one was Sumney Town, which was the ashram that Kripalu had before they opened in Massachusetts. So, what I found is in my work, I easily got caught up in work, and I was working on my master's at the same time. So, sometimes I needed a break. So I would take vacations to an ashram to relax. And because of the work I was doing, I was okay with people thinking I was going to a diet farm because I didn't want them to think I was going to yoga because that was too woo woo.
wow. And what years was this, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so this would have been 80s, 1980s.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
So I think I first went to Sumney Town like in 83, and then I went up to the mothership in 85. And one of the best classes I ever took, I took with a gentleman by the name of Sudhir. It was a weekend course called Inner Quest Intensive. And shortly after I moved here, I ran into him in Arlington. He is now known as Jonathan Faust.
Yep.
So I knew him when he was a young initiate. And again, he was one of the people that I looked at, I thought, oh, how cool that he's living this life. How could I do that? But my, A-type personality could never get there.
So back in the 80s, what did asana look like and feel like for you?
Um, well, for me, um, the term is used a lot now. I didn't know what it was then. It was an embodiment.
Hmm.
I'm a head dweller, and I live in my head, and yoga helped bring the sensation into my body and really help give myself some acceptance that I hadn't given myself before. And again, that practice came from both moving the body and feeling good. It wasn't a sport that you were pressing your body against, but it was like actually inhabiting the body and breathing and feeling like, hey, I'm an okay person and I feel good moving in this container that I'm in.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I should say I was probably about 50 or 60 pounds lighter then too, so that makes a difference.
But it planted the seed, not but, and it planted the seed for for the container that you're in now,
Absolutely.
to
And
get to touch back to the heart of that experience.
that's absolutely true. And it was actually recalling those experiences of the 80s that when I was first diagnosed with diabetes, my dad was dying of Alzheimer, my career was starting to feel like I was burning out, that I thought, I'm too young to feel this old. And
Mm,
when did I ever feel good? And I thought about it, and it was those yoga experiences. So actually, the first class, it was right after I moved here, I took was with Rixie Dennison. And that's what transformed my experience. And as even though I was taking the classes at Sun and Moon, my job pressure was still escalating. I couldn't do Savasana. I mean, I was like literally unglued. And so it was at one point I was recovering from a surgery. I sent Rixie a note and said, I need to take this practice deeper because otherwise I'm going to self destruct. And so I credit her for putting the seed in my head that I could take it further at my age. Um, I still entered the deeper training, not intending to be a teacher. But then as I started to learn about some of the healthcare organizations that were starting to introduce this to an older population, I just became transformed and re-engaged with the benefits of yoga.
What a gift. What a stroke of grace that you were able to touch back to that. I I think a lot about the people who are in a similar situation as you were at that point when you came back to it, who hadn't had that seed planted. And what can we say to them? How can we call in that grace on their behalf, or show the possibilities in light of how much cultural dissemination is so skewed about a false perception of what yoga is, and whom it's for.
Well, I think the first thing you do is you have to find out where that population is. When I first started teaching, I assumed, oh, I'm a yoga teacher. You go to a yoga studio. Well, what I was finding is that for many studios, my style of yoga wasn't attracting the type of people that liked my style of yoga. So the first experience I had actually was with my mother's church group. These people were probably about anywhere from 10 to 20 years older than me. And they're like, we didn't know this is yoga. Oh my God, this is amazing. If this is yoga, we want more of it. I actually met a teacher at a retirement community for retired military, and that just opened my eyes because in that class, the student ranged in age from 70 to the oldest was 99. These people did gentle mat yoga, some of them, and some people were just in the chair. And what I also learned, this was a big blind spot for me, is old people can move and some want to move a lot. So you have to be really careful about saying, oh, these are old, feeble people. I have to be
Right.
careful about what I teach. I mean, it's really about getting to know the students and know where they are.
Well, thank you so much, Denise, for taking the time to chat.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me. It really means a lot, Annie. Thank you so much.
All right. Take good care.
All right, take care.